welcome to this episode of ISSA Canada's Power Hour. Thank you for taking the time to join us today as we explore a challenge that continues to impact our industry and many others. Today, we're tackling a topic that feels an awful lot like a game of Where's Waldo? Finding skilled labor. Last fall, we examined this issue from the perspective of the building service contractor, and today we're expanding that lens in part one of a two-part series focused on this topic. I'm thrilled to introduce our special guest today, Brad Ratz. He is Director of Growth Strategy and Customer Experience at H2R Business Solutions. Brad brings a wealth of cross-industry experience and a strong track record of transforming workplace culture to drive sustainable growth. Today, we're going to tap into this vast experience and hear Brad's insights. Brad, please help us make sense of this ongoing labor crisis and what we can do to move forward.
Well, thank you for the intro, Tanya, and it's a pleasure to speak to everybody today around tackling, talent management, recruitment, and it is turning into a bit of a game of cat and mouse, and hopefully we can provide you some tactical items to do and some strategies to support you along the journey. So. As Tanya mentioned, so my name's Brad Ratz. I'm from H2R. We're a HR consulting firm based out of Ontario, but we service all of Canada. I'm the former head of HR for a large property developer based out of Ontario as well. I am an ICF certified coach, trained facilitator, and I do sit on several boards throughout Canada, and continue to do that through both profit and nonprofit sectors. A bit about H2R. So we are an HR consulting firm. We do fractional HR services, and from a strategy perspective, all the way down to a generalist, or writing policies, helping with writing employee handbooks, those types of areas. One thing we pride ourselves on is we do transparent pricing for all of our services, and we do give a dedicated consultant to all clients. Doesn't matter how small or big the project is, you'll always have a dedicated consultant that gets to know your business and brings some industry knowledge along with them. And then we also do have subscription models, which are more and more popular as time goes on. We were founded in 2016 by Jill, who used to work for BlackBerry, and ever since then we've continued to grow. Right now we have an HR consulting division, a recruitment division, and then we also have a training and development division as well. And that with our client list, that brings and allows us to have quite a bit of knowledge and a sharing of best practices across multiple industries, and we bring that together and are able to offer different things to our clients and different knowledge elements. So today I want to talk to you a little bit about recruitment and the strategies and some of the stuff that we're seeing across multiple industries, and how you can harness those shifts to work better for you. And so we're going to talk about, understanding the dynamics of that, and, how can we incorporate that into the janitorial and cleaning sector. And so when we talk about attracting talent, recruitment strategies, these are 6 of the most common areas that we look at and seem to have the largest ROI for organizations. So one is compensation evaluation, career development, although I'll talk about this a little bit later, but career development can be viewed in a few different ways. And so I'll talk a little bit about that. Work-life balancing, it's got to be the right fit for them. Having a positive work culture and understanding who you are as an organization, employer branding, and a significant one that's playing even a higher role now is technology and data. Continues to be a big driving factor when it comes to recruitment and different strategies. And so compensation and career development. So this is a big, broad area, but one that I want to talk about initially is when we're talking compensation, most organizations view this as, base pay or hourly rate. And margins can be very, very tight, and base pay, can be set at what you need to be able to do to operate profitably as a business. And so, one question that we usually ask, and a good question to ask yourself, is not just about compensation, but am I doing the right compensation? And we talk about that in terms of incentive plans and how to view that. So, an example would be, do we want X role to be paid an hourly rate? Do we want it to be piecework? Do we want to do a combination of both? Is there a bonus incentive that we can do? There's also elements of spot bonuses or other rewards, and you would see those typically worded as like employee of the month programs. But what those do is they drive certain behaviors. So a good question to ask is, does our compensation package drive the behavior that we want out of employees? Another one under compensation is to allow for career transition or upskilling. And so this one's an interesting one, and I'll give an example of a client that we had. And what they did is looked at their employees and they said our typical employee works for us for around 18 months. So we get about a year and a half, and then they choose to leave us. And so they had a bit of a pivotal moment where they said, well, we can either try to retain for 18 longer than 18 months. And how do we retain them for longer than 18 months? Or how do we steer into this and be more consistent? And is there a way to turn this into a win? And what they came up with is they learned that most of their staff were students going to school, and the programs they were taking were typically 24-month programs. So what they were doing was working for about 18 months, then looking to move on into either a co-op placement or a paid thing. And so what they did from a compensation perspective is they implemented a continuous learning program where the employees would have their schooling paid for, a portion of their schooling paid for, as long as they committed for 18 months. And if they left before 18 months, then they would have to pay back the contributions the employer made. And this was really interesting because it allowed them to um, not only retain the employees more consistently for the 18-month period, but it also allowed them to better plan because they knew, you know, these three employees, Billy, Bob, and Joe, are going to be out about their 18 months. We anticipate that they're probably going to leave us based on the data that we have. And so we should start hiring now to backfill those roles. We know and we can anticipate when this turnover is going to happen. And so what you can do with these is again, look at, do we have the right incentive and pay structure? And then what are we paying, and are we going to pay, what the market's paying? Are we going to pay below market, above market? And just giving it some thought and being intentional with your compensation programs. Work-life balance is another one that we're seeing as a higher priority. We actually saw one survey where hybrid or remote work options was the number one deciding factor for this segment of hires. So looking at, how can we offer remote or hybrid or flexible work life balance, and what does that look like for our business as it stands right now? And there are going to be barriers. If you need somebody on site, you need them on site. But can we turn this into a win-win and a benefit to our employees? Another one that I have an example of this that was interesting to us is we had a company that wanted to add a shift during the day to help with some work that they needed to get done. And what they did was, rather than posting a job from 9 to 5, what they did is they posted a job with flexible hours, and anytime they could work 4 hours, anytime between 9 and 3. And just by thinking in this way, what they saw an influx of applications. And when they worked through the applications, what they saw was a really high application of stay-at-home moms who needed the flexibility to be able to drop their kids off at school, pick them up from school, but were still looking for work. And so by thinking in this way, they essentially tapped into an entire demographic of potential employee that nobody else was capturing in the market. And so this is when you think about work-life balance, you start asking questions around what's possible, what would work for our business, and what assumptions maybe are we making right now that we should challenge and have some conversations about. You can unlock this hidden potential as an organization. The other element to this is that positive working culture, and being transparent about, how you operate, who you are. This comes back to the organizational strategy, what your values are as an organization, and making sure that you're living those day in and day out. So the other one that comes up a lot is employer branding, and this can have a significant impact on not only retaining, which is where most people's heads go, but also attracting talent. And we see this quite often when we do reviews of companies. Their highest interactions with content that they've produced externally is typically when they're doing either employee stories, community work, attending events. And so, from a recruitment side, what this brings into the table is somebody who's looking to apply for your organization typically is going to visit your website, your social media, and it starts telling a story about who you are and can be a deciding factor when they're looking at joining potentially you or somebody else, or looking to decide if they want to apply or not apply to the organization. So there's this external element of attracting hires by posting to social media. And what I typically say when I'm working with clients around this is to always make sure you're getting credit for the work that you do. A lot of times we don't want to bring in our ego. We don't want to come across as bragging. But when you're doing these types of things, especially community work, those types of opportunities, it does pay dividends to get that out there and really show people who you are. On the flip side, from the internal, again, getting credit for the work that you're doing is critical. And you want to make sure that you're sharing it, whether or not that's via email, a group chat, however you're choosing to communicate with employees. You want to make sure you're getting credit for these engagements and what you're doing. And as a side note to this, when you are thinking about getting credit for these, when you're sharing these stories, one question that I always pose is, how do you know the message is getting to the right people? And I want to share a story of a company that I actually used to work for. And when I first started with them, they shared everything through a intranet, which was a SharePoint site. And for the manufacturing division, they had an iPad in the lunchroom that had access to the intranet. And they really were struggling with why they weren't getting responses, uptakes. People weren't able to share stories that they thought they had communicated. And what we were able to do is we were able to have IT pull, and I guess with SharePoint, you can check how many times something gets clicked. And when they checked the iPad, there was actually 0 clicks on the iPad. So they had this assumption that what they were communicating was getting out to employees. And for this division, it wasn't. It actually was 0. There was nobody clicking on the links, and really that was where the gap was. So you also want to make sure that you're communicating effectively when you're sharing these things. So technology and recruitment. So we have a really competitive job market and we almost have an overabundance of where to look for jobs. And so there's a few different strategies within the technology area that you can look that are also fairly inexpensive. And so, we want to look at how do you incorporate those within your business. So the most common one to look at is something called an ATS system, applicant tracking system. And this could be as simple as using your Indeed profile to filter through resumes. But you could also look at other companies such as Bamboo HR is quite popular, Career Plug, and Breezy HR. There's several ATS systems out there that you can choose. How do these help you? Well, what they're going to do is rather than posting on one job board, they're going to post on, some of them will post onto 10, 12 job boards automatically for you. And so you cast a wider net, and then the law of averages starts coming into play. You're getting in front of more people. In theory, you should get more applicants and hopefully find the best person for that job because you have a larger sample size. For jobs though that get a lot of applications, and so we have some jobs that we post that within 72 hours, we have over 1,000 applicants. What the ATS system will do is it will filter out automatically those that may not be a right fit. And we typically will do this through two different areas. One is through knockout questions. So a knockout question could be as simple as, if the job really does require more than 5 years of experience, do you have more than 5 years of experience? Could be a knockout question. And if they answer no, then the system would automatically move them to disqualified. The other one is using AI functionality where you've loaded in what the job role is, usually through a job description. And the system will compare that and the keywords within that to the resume and give you a score of how likely it is this person is going to be a good fit for the job. And you can set a threshold between, what gets kicked away and what gets in front of you to be viewed. No system in that regard is perfect, but you can save quite a bit of time. One thing too with applicant tracking systems that I typically like to have conversations around is also, are you getting in front of the right person? So with a lot of our construction clients, as an example, they actually have a much higher success posting for job roles on Facebook Marketplace and Kijiji for general labor roles versus Indeed, LinkedIn, those types of hiring tools. And they usually get a better response posting there. So an applicant tracking system will help, but sometimes you do have to just think, who is the ideal person I'm trying to hire? And where are their eyes going to be looking? How do I get in front of the person that matters most? And that is going to be a good fit for the role. The other one is looking at the how to hire for your role. And so an example of this that we look at is how many touch points does it take to hire somebody? And how do we reduce that drag on the organization? And this also has another benefit of giving you time back as either an owner operator or hiring manager, because you're removing that drag or that resistance. And from the applicant side, it helps from the recruitment side and retention side because they're getting a good experience as they go through. And so you see quite a few tools out there to help with this, but it could be digital, having digital forms versus paper, having forms that are filled out through a web browser or an app that automatically process everything on the back end. And you can also do online functions. So one thing that we see a lot of is not necessarily maybe an assessment, but it could be a quiz or a course to validate a certain skill or to get training done for that role. So an example would be, if somebody needs to have specific training for a chemical handling that's beyond what would be covered under normal WMIS training, you can include that through the process, and technology will be able to take that off your plate. And so from your side, you get that time back. It's a great experience. And from the candidate side, again, they're really enjoying their time because it looks professional. Everything's laid out for them. And so you can look at ATS systems, and again, there's very inexpensive, some even free, like Indeed, or there's some paid for applicant tracking systems out there that will greatly benefit you. And again, from the recruitment side, get you in front of more people, get you in front of the right people to bring into the organization. And then we have sourcing techniques beyond just what you would think from a job posting. And I'm going to pause here because I wanted to talk a little bit about job posting and job descriptions. We very often think of a job posting as we copy and paste what we think of as a job description, and we copy and paste that into the job posting, and we post essentially a cut and paste version of our job description. What I would have everyone think of is essentially the job posting is your sales pitch to a potential candidate. And so there may be elements in a job description that may not be worded or laid out that you would want to match your job posting. And they can be two separate things. The other thing with job postings is what we typically see and what the data tells us is you actually at the very top of your job posting typically want to put things like your pay range, the benefits available, any perks that you have as a company, and who you are as a company at the top of the job posting. And then you want to follow that underneath with what the job actually is. So your job that you're trying to hire for. And the reason that we recommend this is because when we look at the data, what most people do that's not formatted that way is they scroll to the bottom anyway to check what the perks are, benefits are, schedule is, and then they look at the job. And so by giving it right up front, you're going to get more clicks and you're going to get in front of more people, and you should win more candidates versus competitors that are not following that format. Because what's happening is while they're scrolling through the job posting, they're not going to click on every one, but you're giving them the information that they want right up front. They're more likely to click on that because now they've seen that it's something that fits what they're looking for, either from work life around schedule, wage, or particular perk that's speaking to them that they value. Other things beyond traditional job postings that work really well, employee referral programs. The data is very clear. The success of a referral that you hire versus a non-referral, so somebody that you've gone out and attracted and hired, is staggering the difference. Referrals always have a higher ROI. There's social media recruiting, and this is a bit different, but again, this is posting to areas like Facebook Marketplace or Kijiji, or posting on Instagram that you're hiring, and just get to in front of a different set of eyes or potentially a different market. There's also community partnerships. So this could be, again, a stepping stone. So we're really good at training this group of individuals with this skill. And so we want to get access to those individuals that might be coming out of a schooling program or looking for different work. Industry events and job fairs. We see this a lot with organizations that have seasonal work. So if you have somebody that's hiring you and you know that you have a spike of work for the holidays or for summer, job fairs or industry events work really, really well. And Indeed actually has a job fair tool that's free that you can host your job fair if you do have a seasonal element to your organization and you need to do rapid hiring. Educational institutions are always a great partnership, especially if you're looking for contract workers for a set period of time, typically the summer. You have passive candidate outreach, talent communities, and talent pools. And talent pools is an interesting one. And there is some legislation coming out around this where you would have to share that it is what's called an evergreen posting. But you can keep postings up all the time. Just be mindful that legislation is coming in that you would just have to share that it is a posting that's up all the time. But this allows you to keep fresh resumes coming in at all times. And there are perks to that, and there are some drawbacks to that as well. But it is an effective tool if used correctly. And then there's also targeted associations and job boards that you can go on, and that's the more traditional sense in terms of job posting. And then this is getting back a little bit to the optimization around the recruitment process. And this has um, a lot of benefits, but will help you get, again, a stronger candidate, deliver a stronger experience. An interesting stat is the average person will choose to work for you within the first 72 hours of their first shift. So by having an efficient and optimized recruitment process, you're going to leave a positive impression, and they're more likely to choose to stay and stay for a longer period of time. And so some tools that you can have for this process, again, ATSs are a key element to this, applicant tracking systems, and they will help you with hiring, the workflows for hiring, so automating a lot of it, and tracking applications throughout each stage and keeping a pool of candidates. You can do online assessments and different screening tools. This would include things all the way to the far side of doing actual virtual interviews or timed questions or skills to more basic knockouts, very simple questions to see if they would be a good fit for the organizations. Um, Sourcing and candidate outreach platforms. So this would be software like LinkedIn Recruiter, where it will allow you to outreach directly to candidates coming in. You've also got recruitment analytics and reporting, so tracking key metrics. And I'll go over as an owner operator or a leader or a people leader what key metrics are to look at in the recruitment space shortly. But understanding how well you're performing is very, very key. And then employer branding and career sites. Again, creating engaging job postings, career pages that highlight who you are and what you do. And so if you're a people leader and owner operator in the recruitment space, these are the KPIs that typically matter the most. And if you win at these, you'll win at recruitment. So one would be time to fill, and I'll go as to how this benefits you in a second. But the time to fill is very interesting because it lets you know how long, when a role becomes vacant, do I need to hire and fill that role. And so that's an important one because it tells you. So I'll go back to my previous example. If I know somebody's going to be with me for 18 months, and I know my time to fill or time to hire metric is 60 days, well, I need to start hiring for that role at month 16 so that I know that I'm going to have that person to replace once that person leaves within 18 months. So that's a very important metric. And it will also tell you how well your systems are working. So if you use an applicant tracking system, if you're using a different outreach, if you're just taking in resumes, if you're doing job fairs, will tell you how well those systems are working. Cost per hire is another really important one. And this can also help determine if you would like to, and I'll use the 18-month example. What's our cost per hire? Are we better to take that money and try to retain that employee for longer than 18 months? Or are we better just to hire somebody else? Is our cost per hire low enough that we're comfortable as an organization just replacing that role every 18 months or so, however the length of time that the typical employee is with you? This is also something from an operational standpoint. Again, everything costs money. You want to make sure it's effective. And if your cost per hire is getting really high, then you might want to look at what's our recruitment strategy? Are we targeting the right people? And can we bring that cost down? Another one is a source of hire. This is one that is critical to me because it'll tell you, what demographics are we hiring and where are we getting them from? And so that could be, are we being more effective on a Facebook marketplace? Are we more effective on Indeed? Are we more effective on LinkedIn? Tracking that will help you when it comes time to rehire that role and understanding where that demographic of candidate, of a great candidate, is coming through. And then you could be more strategic and intentional with how you're recruiting them. Candidate conversion rate, that really is a metric that will tell you how well is our job posting and how well is it at getting the right candidate in front of us. And this is a big one and goes back to if you're thinking about job description and job posting, a job description may not be effective at getting you the right candidate. So you would have to modify that job posting to get to the right candidate and speak in the language that's going to resonate with the ideal candidate. Offer acceptance rate. So this one will tell you how many times are you doing a job offer where the person chooses not to sign and actually be hired for you. So this is they've gone through the entire interview process, you've offered them the job, and they're saying no. And this is really important because if they are saying no, why are they saying no? And how do we stop that? How do we plug the bucket from draining water if we're seeing candidates not accept offers? Retention rate is another key one. Retention rate speaks to how long are employees choosing to stay with us. And this will help with a little bit of workforce planning. How often are we going to have to go out there and hire? And what resources do we need to do that? Or how do we get people to stay with us longer? And then this one would be optional, but is a best practice, which is doing a candidate experience score. And typically we would see this done around the probation period. So typically 90 days, where you're really asking for feedback around how well did we do? You know, how much did your expectations of the organization line up with how our organization actually functions? And getting that feedback to be able to modify and adapt very quickly, and making sure that those are aligned. So some factors for long-term success. So one I want to pull out of here. So there's quite a few here. We've talked about several of them, but there's two that I want to pluck out of here. One is the training and growth opportunities. And so one thing that's really prominent that we're seeing a lot of right now in the small organizations that don't have a lot of vertical growth. There's not a lot of manager roles to grow into. Or for larger organizations, when we're looking at the generations in the workplace, especially Gen Z, we're seeing this lack of appetite to try to grow vertically into that manager's role for more money, etc. And so what we're seeing a lot of is looking at a training program and saying, how can I develop employees, upskill their work on a horizontal plane? So is there something that's enticing them that they would want to learn from another job role, not necessarily the next manager's role? And having open dialogue around what that would look like and not putting pressure on this vertical growth, because we're seeing a lot of resistance from it. Or, again, for a smaller organization, you may not have that job role for them to move into. So being very clear and having conversations around training, but looking at training not just from the vertical, but along the horizontal of how do we upskill you and make you a better, more rounded employee overall. And we do see training and growth, well, more the training side, as one of the biggest intrinsic motivators. And an intrinsic motivator is what drives an employee beyond just wages. And typically, an intrinsic motivator, if an employee doesn't have an intrinsic motivator, they're typically going to last with you less than a year. Doesn't matter how much you pay them. So this helps with those conversations as well. The other one is implementing recognition systems. So this could be employee of the month. This could be, we actually see one client that has a really interesting program is the entire leadership team hand writes a thank you card to employees. And, you know, we don't think about pen on paper anymore, but the level of engagement and excitement employees get from just a handwritten card is very inexpensive, but the impact is almost immeasurable. Employees look forward to it. They love it. The only caveat is it has to be specific. You know, when they started, they were doing more generic, just thank you, didn't really mean much. But when they're putting pen to paper and it's very specific around, I observed you doing X, great job, we really appreciate it. Again, the response is great. So recognition systems don't have to cost a lot of money, but if you're intentional and purposeful with them, you can get a very big return on investment by implementing them within the organization. And again, if you have those programs, list them as a perk when you're job posting. So you're going to capture not only the retention, but you can also use it depending on the program that you develop as a perk for the organization to help attract candidates coming in. Um, Another big area is, you know, people choose to work for the organization, but they don't necessarily choose their boss, and they will leave over a poor boss. So focusing on leadership development, whether or not you want to invest in formal leadership training, some type of mentorship program, uh, some areas that would be inexpensive and not cost money. Feedback sessions, don't cost a lot, just some time, but can really help with development, bringing up any concerns and getting those addressed before you start seeing a high turnover, which is our way of saying, employees leaving. And then also bringing into the element around competitive wellness and compensation programs. One area, if you do offer a benefits program as an organization, that we've seen significant interest in is employee assistance programs. And they're typically free, they're included with a group benefits program, but many organizations don't take advantage of communicating it and don't get credit for it as a perk. But the employee assistance programs are very, very broad in offering. They do vary, but they're very, very broad in offering, and they can be an incredible retention tool, and they're for employees when they need it. So getting into benefits, comprehensive benefit packages. And when I think about benefit packages, they are a good retention tool. They're also a good attraction tool if you're intentional and purposeful with them. And when I talk to clients, one thing that I let them know is you don't need a huge, robust benefits package to attract. It's beneficial, of course, if you can offer it, all the better. But you can do simple things like a health spending account, which can be very inexpensive and can definitely increase retention and give you something within your job posting to attract candidates that you have something there for them. Other benefits that we would consider as a total reward, so part of the job as a whole, is work-life balance perks. And again, make sure you get credit for those if you have them in place. Recognition and rewards. So what are you doing in that area? And again, if you have a system in place, making sure you're getting credit for it. And benefits like pensions and career development programs can also help with that. And I always keep in mind there are companies that will do a pension plan for you at no cost really to the organization because they're getting the investment money as a group investment plan, and so the cost to the organization can be very low, but the value seen from employees can be very, very high. So there's ways to navigate that again from an effective costing perspective, where you're going to get the return, you'll get the benefit, employees will love the value, but as an organization, it's not really a substantial cost. And the key when you're looking at retention strategies, recruitment, really that entire bucket, if you can do one thing and walk away with one thing, it is creating some form of feedback loop. Your employees will tell you what matters to them. And so regular surveys, and there's so many free ones out there that you can use now, but there's also, if you're a Microsoft user, Microsoft Forms, so many ways to get out there, but creating a feedback loop where you're getting that feedback around what's important to them is always critical and will help you remain agile as a market shifts, as a demographic shifts, as priorities shift, will allow you to stay up to date. Performance monitoring. So we talked about KPIs before. If you don't track all the KPIs, starting to track at least one or two will make a significant difference in how you start recruiting and how you're recruiting and how you're performing. And having an open door policy or being out there to physically talk with staff. And there's different ways to do this, but having some form of communication out there for open door will allow you to get the feedback that you need. One thing that I'll share around feedback loops that actually just recently happened with a client, which ties directly into this, is they do have a feedback loop. And it's funny, they've been in business for about 10 years and their employees have aged. So the employees typically were in the younger demographic, not married, no kids. And when they were doing surveys, benefits, pension plans, those types of employee perks were always scored low in terms of priority. And now that the company's approaching 10 years, they're starting to score significantly higher to the point where we've got to reassess those plans for the organization. So that is the type of shifts you can get through these very simple feedback loops if you implement them in your business. So I hope this was useful and at least got a few takeaways that you can take back to your organization, some questions that you can ask yourself to move things forward and impact how you can recruit and retain staff within the organization. And also, we've partnered with ISSA, and we're really excited to offer a HR health check to all ISSA members. It's going to be it's a flat fee for $600, and we will audit not just recruitment, but we're going to audit all of the HR elements, all the people functions, and give you a full detailed report. The HR audit typically takes between 5 to 7 hours to complete. We need somebody who understands the business for about 2 hours of that. And we get a full detailed report. The entire HR audit is around just over 200 questions. And it will also help guide you in terms of where may be the best places to start making an impact and allowing your number one asset, which is your people, to really start moving the business strategy forward. With that, thank you everyone for the time. Tanya, I don't know, I don't have on my screen anywhere questions. I'm not
There
able to
is,
see the chat.
there are a couple questions. Some of them are from me, but okay, go
Yeah.
ahead.
Uh, so Brad, for a small business, particularly looking at the advanced recruiting strategies, how realistic is it for a company to do that on their own? And then there's a second part to my question I didn't finish typing, but and then to partner with your company, what is it that you can do, or where do you help in a situation like that?
Yeah, great question. I think first, I'll separate it into two areas because small business can be fairly broad. It's up to interpretation. But at one level, if you are on the smaller side of things, the recruitment strategies are, um, I guess, would have been more of a challenge to implement in the past, but technology has really broken through that barrier. And one example I would give you is we had a smaller business that was really struggling with recruitment, and they're a drywalling company. And so the owner would be doing the interviews, but he's also doing the work. He's got to have that balance, and that was the challenge. So what we were able to do with him, which was really interesting, is essentially we were able to allow him to hire somebody, and I think we got it down to 5 button clicks. So he could post a job with one button click. The system had knockout questions and it had an auto scheduler. And so the auto scheduler linked to his website or his calendar. And so what the scheduler would do is basically, if you got through the knockout questions, it would say arrive on pick your day, and it would say where the job site is that they were on. And the candidate could meet them on the job site, tour around. He would do the interview on the job site, and then would be able to, if they were good, hire them through the software, and it would automate all the forms and everything for them. So, the technology has really allowed these more advanced strategies that would typically be run by a recruitment division or an HR department within an organization and function independently, that an owner operator has access to. And the other benefit to those is it gives the owner operator time back, which is the most valuable asset any company can have.
Mhm.
In terms of us, where we would come in is typically setting or configuring that, understanding, what pain points are you experiencing? And then how do we solve for those pain points um, for the long term? And so what I mean by that is it's typically for a small business not effective for them to hire us to recruit for every role. The cost would be too great. It wouldn't be financially responsible. So what we would look at is, okay, what pain points are there? And then what long-term fixes can we put in place that essentially would allow us to remove ourselves from the organization, right? Solve it, and then you're functional as an organization and able to fill it. On the
Mhm.
other side, small businesses, we have some businesses that do, or clients that do 500 million a year, but they're only 25 employees. And that's just how the organization is set up, and that's how their cash flow works. And so for those companies, again, we can get into more advanced because usually the roles are more technical. They're an engineering role, architectural role, that type of stuff. And again, we can help them be more effective in how they recruit, because you have a large candidate pool, but how do you get the best candidate? Because you want the highest technical aptitude. And there's different things that we can help with that. So I guess, does that answer your question, Tom? Is that enough information?
Yeah, I think so. And then I guess that leads to another question that popped up as you were talking, and that is, uh, so for someone to engage with H2R, is it, can you do it for a specific project? Do you need to set up a ongoing contract? How does that work?
Yeah, so our process for any new client or any client is always a discovery call, which is absolutely free. And we really try to dive into, okay, what pain points are we trying to solve for? And then from there, what does it take to solve those? And so I mentioned a bit earlier, but we do have many different services. And so that could be either project based. So, I want to do a better hiring program. And so I want a just one-time fee. We have quite a few clients that do a subscription, and we have you can engage with us on a monthly basis. I think it starts at $340 a month. And that would give you access to engage with us on a monthly basis for support. And then we also have just ad hoc hourly. We see that quite often. I just got served a demand letter, or this legislation came across my desk. I need help navigating it, and then we do ad hoc services. One thing that we always do, though, it doesn't matter what service you start with, or even if you're just an hourly or once every 6 months, you still get a dedicated consultant, because part of that journey is we want to understand the business, what pain points we're solving, bring in some industry specific elements to help you succeed and win as an organization. But your first step would always be to either through the website, through Google, through social media, reach out, and we would book a discovery call, which is absolutely free, and then we can walk through that.
Excellent. So, Brad, we have a question from Susan. She thanks you for your time, and she's asking about the evergreen posting legislation. Is that across Canada, or is it Ontario or a specific province?
Yeah, so that legislation is part of the Workers for Work Act,
Yeah.
and it is across Canada. It achieved royal assent, but we don't have the exact specifics of it yet. We know it's coming. Same with pay transparency. We know pay
Mhm.
transparency is coming January 1st, 2026, but we don't have the exact details of exactly what the government's looking for in the outline of that yet, but it will be across Canada.
I see. Okay. Now I have a question about the social media recruiting. So, how can you increase the impressions on the social media in terms of recruitment? Is it about the language that's used? What does that like? How can you maximize that?
Yeah, your impressions are going to only get the number of impressions that your profile, like the algorithm that's
Yeah,
that's in your profile is going to get. So the way to improve that is to what I spoke about earlier, which is posting more frequently so that the algorithm grabs you more for your postings. And those postings could be around community stuff, what you're doing, if you're at an expo, interacting with a client stories. But you can also sponsor, which costs money.
of course.
From effectiveness, typically the better question to ask is what social media platform is going to get me in front of, or most likely to get me in front of the person
Well,
that I actually want to hire. And yeah, and that would be understanding, you know, what's a good example that I can use that we've ran into recently? You could post, Facebook or Kijiji versus LinkedIn. Like LinkedIn is going to give you typically a more technical aptitude person. So if
mhm.
I need somebody with a specific technical aptitude, um, project management, coordinator to engineer, architect, those types of areas, versus Facebook or Kijiji or those types of postings are gonna, not that they're not on there, but your posts are typically going to get in front of more of a general laborer, like the lower aptitude of skills.
Hmm.
That's the first question to ask, and that information is out there. If you Google it and say I'm trying to hire this person, what's going to get me in front of the most people, that information is out there
Hmm.
to get in front of. But that's the first question I would ask, is what's going to get me in front of the eyeballs
Mhm.
the most for the right candidate, because it doesn't matter just to get in front of eyeballs. You want to
Yeah.
get in front of the eyeballs of the right person with the right skills, with the right availability, with all the right little nuances that you need to fill that role to make them successful in that role. That's the first question to ask.
Excellent. Okay. And finally, I know this is probably more touching upon what we're going to discuss in part two on May 21st, but in terms of you did touch upon recruiting and onboarding. So, I mean, for most employers, that can be a relatively high expense when you consider bringing the people in, training them, putting that expense out to have them properly trained, and then they leave within 72 hours. Like, is there some kind of a time frame that would be suitable? Like, should employers wait a week before doing these kind of trainings that are gonna, it's an expensive thing. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think again, for me, when we're designing onboarding programs, it comes down to purpose and intent. Um, and the first question I would ask is, if it's happening often enough, then you've got to take another step back and question the recruitment process. And are we finding the right candidates, or are we communicating something that's not landing right, that's causing them to leave? But the Harvard Business Review publishes quite often, but they change it every few years usually. But typically, if you have an employee, it's about one-time salary is what it costs your business when you lose them, to replace them.
Hmm.
And that factors in the recruitment costs, the training costs, getting them up to speed, the negative impact on customers or clients, whatever your model is. And it factors in all of those things. So it is incredibly costly. So that would be one element. In terms of the onboarding, how can you address that? Again, it comes back to intent and purpose, and are we bringing them along that journey that they're comfortable? And if you are having issues with that, um, personally, what I would do is I would try to look back at that feedback loop, and I would be reaching out to the people that did drop off and asking them for some feedback around, hey, you know, I appreciate that you've chosen to leave us, and I respect that, but I'd love some feedback around what helped you get to that decision, and what could we do better? And that will really help bubble up that pain point that you need to solve for.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. Well, Brad, I thank you. And again, we're going to reconvene on the training and onboarding for our next, and retention, of course, on our next session, which again will be on May 21st. So don't forget to register. And thank you everybody for your time. Have a great day.